The information and services contained in this program are intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended as investment advice. Producers of this content are not responsible for the accuracy or validity of any information contained herein. Please consult your financial advisor prior to any investment decisions.
What are public goods? I'll start off just by saying that's a question within actually DAOPlanet. I feel like this is a public good. We give away for free what we do, this education, and if it's education around funding public goods, and we can all help change the world by creating the structures and the organizations, the protocols. Would love to turn it over to other people because we don't often think about what we do as a public good, and I'd love everybody to just reflect on what is it that they do, and how does that benefit humanity, and what part of that is a public good?
Hi everyone, I'm Max. I'm co-founder of Tributor, it's a free talent platform, and we're ourselves not a public good, but we would like to route some earnings to public good, and I think you should build with a public good in mind, whatever you build in the free, to just to have like egoistic win of the market which is relying on public goods, because if you're building something extracting value from the ecosystem, your ecosystem will be forked or just not usable, and it's beautiful to see how public goods define the future of projects that is not started yet, because they should be having public good inside of them.
Well, as I told you, I spent a good part of my life trying to do public good, but through research initially. I won't lie, I loved research, I loved science, so that was part of the drive. But in the back of your mind, you're always thinking you could do something good for the public, and we write our grants for that cause. But it wasn't enough. In my mind, I'm completely 100% convinced that for-profit companies, building true, genuine companies to do something important is the way to go. It's hard, it takes 10 years on average, you gotta bust your ass, and that's it. So get busy, people. If you have some good idea about doing something that helps the public, do it. Don't think about the money, because the money is always gonna be there if you do something good, and it may not be a 10x that satisfies venture, but if it's a 2x, it's okay because you got your job and you're doing your thing and you're getting paid and you're doing something you care about. So for me, find the thing that drives you, how you can help people, make a difference, and build it. That's it.
Hey, so I think with public goods and optimism, what I do is a simple way to kind of condense it is, let's make anyone and everyone who's designing public goods, who wants to do nonprofit work, who wants to do things because they generally believe in it, not because they have to like cater to some capital or try to get as much money as possible. Let's make sure they're all millionaires. Let's create a system in which if you're doing this, you don't have to feel like a financial martyr. You can actually make money by not having money be your first intention, by having good be your first intention. And that's a system that we're trying to create with our network.
So my name is JoAnn Holmes. I'm an attorney at Holmes at Law, and I am an intellectual property and digital assets attorney. And I've spent over 20 years helping my clients monetize the things that they create. I fundamentally believe, and it's actually drafted into the US Constitution, that creators should be rewarded. Creativity is protected in the US Constitution. And one of the reasons I'm really interested in Web3 is that I believe that talent is not discriminate, but opportunities are. So there are people all over the world who have talent in ways that they can contribute, either because they're an innovator in technology or because they are a creative. But historically, the way that our systems have been organized have not really been to have the flow of wealth go to the people who are doing that creative work. So as an intellectual property and digital assets attorney, I'm very much at the forefront thinking about how do I help my clients make money? Because wealth equals choices, and I want people who are adding value to our societies to be rewarded for their contributions. I also serve as an advisor on the Blockchain Law for Social Good Center. It's the first of its kind in the United States. It's based out of Golden Gate University. And the whole charter of what we are doing is to help law students, lawyers, and legislators understand the ways that blockchain technology can be used to help real people's lives.
Yeah, I want to add something to that because I think she pegged it. In my mind, we cannot rely on non-for-profits to get things done. It's what we did in the old days, before blockchain. Like a non-for-profit, what was it created for? It was a ledger system, or kind of a black box ledger system, let's be honest. And like I mentioned earlier, JFK came up with an alliance program that got completely exploited by corruption because we couldn't follow it. It wasn't transparent. So that's old school, in my opinion. I mean, the non-for-profits will probably get really pissed at me, but the reality is we don't really need you anymore to administrate that. What we need is people being rewarded for discovering something that's valuable for helping people, and they get paid. And I can give you a really specific example that happened in Cape Town. When I told a young woman what I was doing on the street, she said, "Oh, I helped the homeless during the pandemic, and I got a bunch of women together from the church, and we were oversubscribed with goods that we delivered to these communities." And I was like, "And you did that volunteer?" And, "Yes." And I'm like, "Well, the hell with that. We're going to make that a company. And then you can hire people from those communities to work in that company, and the DAO will pay you." And now they're making profit, and that's a way bigger incentive than volunteering, because she had to make money for her own family. And she wasn't a rich person, she was a Christian. And she wanted to do this because she felt it was the right thing. How many here would dedicate hours a day volunteering and delivering food and toothbrushes to homeless communities? Probably no one. But but these people were doing it, so I thought, make it a for-profit. It's a great idea. Let's organize it, and you make a profit doing it. And that's where I'm coming from. You gotta have the for-profit element there. It's the biggest incentive there is. And it doesn't have to be 10x. 10%, 15%, what government gives us if we do a project for government as a for-profit. They give us a 15% margin on the work. VCs would hate that. But I love it because I can keep doing my work. So I have contracts coming from DOD to do stuff. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I don't need more.
In many ways, the definition of modern corporations, where it's all top down, you've got shareholders basically hiring and firing the CEO, and everything else is trickle down from there. I think many of us might agree that trickle down doesn't really work. It's just a sales job, and DAOs are maybe that's the definition of extractive. All the labor, all the value and the profits being extracted to the highest degree possible to distribute to shareholders, to passive investors. And if you have DAOs and we're actively pursuing these goals, just a DAO funding its own community and providing livelihoods is also, I think, in a big way, a definition of a public good. So in my mind, they're DAOs, and we kind of talked about what is a DAO. It's more of a cooperative. I like what you were saying, Gennaro, about you need leaders. So protocols can be decentralized completely. I personally like to call the D in DAOs distributed rather than decentralized.
I love distributed. That's a great word. Lee Hartwell first said that to me. And he goes, "I love the distribution part of this." This is a Nobel laureate, 83 years old, who got it, got blockchain in an hour. And just came back with that comment. I love the distribution part of this. To distribute the risk, you distribute the money, and no one has any major risk. We're all collectively doing something really big together.
I'd love to hear what everybody thinks about how we can kind of take back the power, the community taking back the power, and then doing public goods, supporting the community and doing good in the world.
Yeah, I think it kind of draws me back, and a few panelists have already mentioned it, but to a quote that I heard when I was a kid that greatly, greatly, greatly impacted my life to this day. And it lies with the idea, as you mentioned, of how, there's opportunities not in abundance. Ideas are in abundance, but not everyone has the opportunity to execute on those ideas. And the quote was, what if the cure for cancer was stuck inside the mind of a child who could not afford an education? It may be, right? And I think what we're doing with distributed systems and decentralized organizations, et cetera, is creating a pathway for anyone to come in and speak about their ideas, speak about their opinions, speak about their values. What we see today is this idea of profit is greater than impact, right? You have a bunch of shareholders caring about your profit. They don't care really about the impact. It's like, give me the bottom line, bottom line, bottom line. And what we want to create is a world in which profit equals impact. And that's where this idea of retroactive funding comes in. I think that's basically we want to reward people for impact over profit. So I'm curious as how that goes. But yeah, that quote's just very, very much stuck with me. And I think when Stephen mentioned the word distributed, it's let's distribute the opportunity to contribute to something. And not centralize it, not just locationally, but just let's not centralize it under status. You don't have to have gone to an elite university to be a smart person, right? You can be a person and you should get the same opportunity. And that's kind of what we're trying to create.
How do we unlock human potential in that way?
You could be Michelle or Roxanne, and maybe to be the best author in the world, but you're every day thinking about where your food's coming from, so you're not really thinking about writing a book. Yeah. But if you had the essentials taken care of, maybe you'll sit down and start writing. And then maybe get another James Joyce out of it. Who knows? So that's the way I think about it. We got to give people opportunity to at least try to better themselves.
I'd love to invite people to come up. We're very centralized here at the front of the stage, and this is the decentralized stage. So who's got the guts to step up here, pass a mic in the front row? So be part of the conversation. Let's make this.
It's always good to
more
stand
like
up and walk
fishbowl,
around because you motivate your
format.
Coming from a biologist.
So this is a fairly general question, but when you think about public goods funding, you think about blockchain, we have the obvious examples of Gitcoin and quadratic funding. That's interesting in its own way, and I think has a lot of potential there. But overall, when you think of blockchain and Web3 specifically, what benefits, what kind of breakthroughs, and a step level kind of improvement do you see in terms of public goods funding?
To me, it's really simple. It's a ledger. It's transparent. It's secure. Anybody can join it, and it can be followed by everybody. That's awesome. When did that ever exist in my lifetime? Never. A year ago when I found out what this really was, it blew my mind. It's damn, you could build a treasury around that, and people could vote on it. And you could even have a for-profit company that's making money from the bank account you guys have in that, increasing it by maybe 5 to 10% a year, which you could just play with that and keep the principal, like any endowment that Harvard has. This is the way forward. Harvard has an administration that costs millions of dollars. A DAO is free, relatively speaking. It's automatic, smart contracts. It's incredible. So for me, it was so simple when I saw it. It was a government without the bureaucracy, which I was fighting for 2 years, which drove me to Bitcoin and blockchain and understanding the Satoshi thing. But revelation for a scientist that didn't know anything about it a year ago. Amazing.
I remember connecting with you last year at DCentral about
there you go.
DeSci funding.
I just learned about it.
Love it.
I would just add also that Web3 is innately global. And so while we here in the comforts of the United States can think about things from the structure of our financial systems and so forth, in a lot of the world, people don't have access to finance. In fact, right here in the United States, there are a number of people who are unbanked and get exploited because they don't have access to any type of currency to be able to do simplistic things like not have to go stand in a line to pay a bill because they don't have a bank account, and so they don't have another way than to go and pay in cash. So really thinking through the public good that occurs when there is a financial system that people can participate in, whether they're in the United States or not. But one of the things that I do, particularly when I serve on boards and I advise nonprofits, is nonprofits have intellectual property. I manage IP in 140 countries. Wherever you are, if you've gotten good at it, you most likely own some IP. And in a traditional system, the way that that IP could be licensed or monetized meant that you had contracts, and then you trusted the other party to pay you what you were due. And I, for example, in a negotiation, would build in language that says a third-party auditor can come in and check and make sure that my client is being paid what they were due, right? When we have blockchain, going to the point of the other panelists, we have transparency, so we can save on costs, and that money can be used in another way. So really thinking about what are DAOs, decentralized or distributed organizations, creating, what talent is in that community, and how can that talent be monetized to help support the objectives of what people in that community care about.
And one thing I would just love to add, and I thought of that as you were speaking, the thing that I was like enamored with, one of the things about DAOs was that it was, with the first principle of the organization is community. Like what kind of organizations get birthed out of something where the first principle is about kind of working together, collaborating, and it's all about community. Because without community, DAOs really don't get off the ground. When I look at the big DAOs, lots of participants, it's all about participation and community, and that's the first principle. And how powerful can that be?
100%. Community is not the only thing, it is everything. And I think like one way to kind of think about this as well is if we trace the lineage of blockchain far enough, we realize that this all started with an open forum post. Satoshi wrote a forum post. There was no money attached to it. People read it and were like, whoa, this is cool, I'm going to work on it. Then we had Bitcoin, then we had Ethereum, now we're in the space that we are today. And a lot of that, and I think the essence of, to answer your question on like how we scale with public goods, is the essence of public goods is open source. All of crypto, all of growth in crypto has been through open source, like transparency, et cetera. And when we create systems that are open source and we have an emphasis to create free and open source software in general in the space, then we can all succeed. There is a fear where in the space right now, as it gets more crowded, there's an incentive to not be open source, right? And I think that is something that specifically DAO-minded individuals can like help fight against in a way. Because the beauty is open source. The beauty is that it's a composable thing. Anyone in the world can come and join. And yeah, like community is not the only thing, it is literally everything. So
I would like to add a couple of things. So blockchain as a technology is a public good itself, and is the first technology that basically funds itself with token issuing and so on. And the composability makes funding public goods not just easier, you need less funds to fund it because you don't need to build everything from scratch. You just fork, add, compose, and the public good is here, and it was like two people just sitting in their rooms. And this is beautiful. And another thing, I believe that blockchain and Web3 created new paradigm for public goods, because before this it was public goods as nature and we did nothing for it, and there was public goods that were fixing the state, where state wasn't able to provide these public goods. And in Web3 we have the new chapter of public goods, where public goods serve the wider community, that no one cares. There's no taxes, no nothing, and we found the way how to fund it and how to make it work for all of us.
yeah, one thing with like public goods and open source software as well is if we think of the most effective version of this ever, we don't have to look any further than the internet. So Tim Berners-Lee created HTTP as a public good. He made zero money out of literally creating the internet, right? Like, how much money do you think that generated? Trillions of dollars, probably by now, at least. Yeah. And he made it. He just let it out into the world. And, imagine blockchain systems as an internet that everybody owns. And I think there's a real power in creating that to be open source and community owned as well.
Imagine if 10% of that money went back to a DAO because it had invested in the internet when it first started.
Another audience.
I do think that there's a lot of power in having this coordination layer that happens automatically and happens in a way that everyone agrees on in a consistent way. But I think that I'm a little skeptical of the separation of decentralization from these public goods organizations, because without decentralization, you're looking at a philanthropic organization, which we already have, and it comes down to a question of how are you assigning the importance of the impact. And if you have a centralization problem, then you're going to end up with a few people that have a personal bias towards particular impacts. So I would kind of posit that and then ask, if the DAO is not sufficiently centralized, how is it different than a philanthropic organization?
I would just say the one piece is the distributed nature and the openness of the organizations. So obviously anything can call itself a DAO, but in my mind what makes a DAO is the fact that it's tapping the inspiration of the masses to contribute back to this common goal that the DAO puts out there. And that's what makes it different, because imagine you take just a nonprofit, but you open that up and you let everybody contribute freely. That's in itself is a huge difference in my mind.
I would also add that I get asked as an attorney sometimes, what do you mean when you say DAO? Because there's a camp of people who say a DAO should be a true DAO in that it's driven by a smart contract and there's less malleability to it. And then there are others in a different camp who say it should really be driven by its membership and its contributors. I say that's not my place to tell you as an attorney. You should go explore what works for what that community wants to build. And I think that's what's really exciting. It's not an LLC and it's not a corporation and it's not a traditional 501c3. It is a new dynamic organization. If we think about, for example, what happened with Ukraine, there was no centralized entity that said anyone who cares about what the Ukrainian people are dealing with should contribute to this specific Red Cross organization or lobby your senator or your congressperson to send aid. All of that is a legacy system that was available, but people who cared dynamically decided to participate. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting. As an attorney, I cannot tell you this is exactly how it should go. The community is going to decide, and there's an opportunity to be organic that I think is unique and something we should celebrate in this community.
I also want to just ask somebody who's actually from Ukraine with friends and family and directly impacted and in the Web3 world.
Actually, I wanted to add to your question that it's all about purpose, and it's not about Web3 in nature. Is just using Web3 to fund, to distribute, to govern, and so on. But if it's centralized and led by someone specific and provides value for the public, I'm fine with it. And if there is unstoppable terroristic organization that run on smart contracts to produce harm, we're kind of fucked. So we should gradually move to full decentralization, but if there is a public good made by someone who decided that it should be public and decided everything all the way down in a centralized way, then it's okay, and it's the same in Ukraine. So we winning, we're not losing this war because we are very, very decentralized in nature as a nation, and most of us don't have any tools to do this work in a proper decentralized manner, but we're still managing to do lots of logistics and evacuation and finding using centralized services and centralized messengers and centralized groups, and there are some leaders making this on a scale. And I'd be happy to see this like leveraging crypto and Web3, but now it's leveraging just this financial aspect. And there was an Unchained fund, which is DAO, and which is distributed lots of funds, but it didn't make a big difference that were decentralized or not. The big difference made the people that gathered together and the people they reached out and that believed in the idea of why it should be like this and donated and helped and served the organization.
We need to start wrapping it up, so I want to give everybody a chance to kind of say, whatever they have to share, and just think in terms of keeping it within like a minute or so.
Yeah. First of all, Unchained Fund is incredible. The Atlantis World team is great, and they do a lot of great work. I think when it comes to DAO centralization, interestingly enough, a lot of it has been solved in the blockchain way. It just has not been solved socially, right? Like blockchains are coordination mechanisms, and a lot of it is technical, financial. For example, the double spend problem isn't fixed. Like optimistic rollups use fraud proofs to basically prove that we're optimistic that it went right, but if it's wrong, we can have a dispute, and someone can go and prove that in a decentralized fashion. It's been solved technically, and it's about bringing that into the social layer. So I think to answer your question on like how to avoid DAO centralization, it's not, as you said, it's not like me or like anyone in a DAO being like, hey, do this, do that, do this. It's actually empowering people to stand up and dispute things and giving them the necessary tools in order to do that. Of course, that can get toxic, but there are ways to design systems through which anyone feels like they can voice their concerns. I think issues with systems today that we see is like everyone's frustrated, but what can I do about it, right? How do I dispute this? We need to create ways to do that within DAOs, and I think there's a lot of DAOs working towards that very effectively. But yeah, last thing I want to say is like definitely check out Optimism if you're interested. We are a massive governance system in many ways, and it's a very, very exciting time. Thank you.
My name is JoAnn Holmes. Again, I am pretty active on LinkedIn, so I would invite people to connect there, and let's continue the conversation. And I would say, I personally feel, especially because there aren't a lot of attorneys in the Web3 space, I feel that for those of us who are on this avant-garde of Web3, we actually have a responsibility to educate and invite other people in so that this space can be reflective of all of the opportunities and not be myopic, and that has to happen intentionally. So what I would ask everybody to do is please feel free to reach out to me and continue the conversation, but also invite other people in so that they can think about the ways that DAOs and blockchain technology can be of service to communities, to corporations, to creators, to innovators. Help them understand how that happens.
JoAnn, I'll give you a call out. I like dynamic autonomous organization. Maybe a new name for DAOs. Yeah, because one size doesn't fit all. This is not about, this is, like you say, it's a new invention. And do what works to get the problem solved. It doesn't have to follow the rules of DAOs. It is blockchain, make it work. And so to directly address your question, which I think was a really good one, there's no doubt in my mind if you're doing something, let's say, for water, shelter, food, and medicine in a DAO, you need a board. You need a centralized group of experts that can review with no pay, that just want to do it. And anybody in the DAO should have the opportunity to become a board member of that group. So you're always, if you're part of that community, you should have the right to become a board member. You should also have the right as a community to get rid of a board member if you don't like them. But at the end of the day, it's about how well you can perform. If you put amazing people on a board, you will attract people to the community. And if you make really good decisions and solve things like the pandemic, people will buy into the community. If you don't, they'll sell their NFT. So it's strictly based on merit, on your ability to hit the milestones, like any for-profit company. That's why I'm against not-for-profits, because there's no incentive to really get anything done. But believe me, as a for-profit, I am one, I'm out to satisfy my customers. And if I don't, I'm out of business. That's a pretty good incentive to keep going. So that's the way I see it. You can't have it both ways. You can't just become 100% decentralized on every decision. It would be a chaotic mess. So you do need to have some leadership at some level, but you still vote on it with the community. So it's not like this is the way it's going to be. You actually get the proposal from them and then vote on it. And majority wins. You don't like it? Leave. It's fluid. It's dynamic. I like it.
And I think this is a great launching off point to the next conversation, which is really about DAO growth and DAO potential. On that note of the potential of DAOs and these conversations, I could have these conversations all day. I like organizing these conversations. I want to invite everybody to more of these conversations that we have together. Will be at ETH Denver. Check out the DAOPlanet table in the back there, and please support the work that we do, maybe through the purchase of an NFT, gets you into all of our programs for the rest of for all of 2023, probably starting with DAO Denver during Build Week in ETH Denver. And we hope to build this community, include and encompass everybody here, join our different groups and discords, and participate. And
yeah, probably to sum up our topic on funding public goods, if we learn from the past, all public goods been either coded into our genes or into our law system, and now most of public good contributors are either rich enough to do whatever they like to do, or they can't do whatever they do now because can't not do. And we need more people to participate, and we need more funds to fund. So I think we should code public good funding and route some of our revenues on a protocol, on a application layer, and it's our responsibility to make more public goods funded through the incentives and mechanisms that we're building. Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much. Let's invite up the next panelists. Let's give this panel and these folks doing amazing public goods a big hand.